When you play Magic, the Gathering and Commander format, the best thing you can do is draw cards. That way, you'll have options, choices, and maybe, after a few turns of card selection, you'll win. When I see my opponents doing that, I want to do something villainous to them. For example, make them discard. Ideally, I want them to discard their entire hand or leave them with just 1 or 2 cards. So they're stuck in that feeling of choice. Do they want to discard this card, or will I get the benefit? Dear friends, subscribe to this channel because here I talk about my decks. So I've already shared with you the story about and its effects. Today we're going to talk about Davros and a second bracket deck that's built around the principle of I want to make my opponents discard almost everything. Almost everything, so that they still give me cards and I have that very choice. Davros Dalek Creator is a commander from the Doctor Who Precon, a legendary artifact creature, alien scientist. He has Menace, and at the beginning of my end step, he creates a 3/3 artifact creature with Dalek Menace, which is created if an opponent has lost 3 or more life. Accordingly, we need to make sure that ideally each opponent loses 3 life. Then we will create a full 3/3 with a threat. But if we do create it, then each opponent who lost 3 or more life will also face the following question. Dear opponent, here's a sinister choice for you. Since you lost 3 life, you must choose. Either I draw a card, or you opponent discard a card. If the opponent has cards in hand, they can say go ahead and draw, or they can choose to discard. If the opponent has no cards in hand, they'll say I'll discard, and then discard nothing. He can do that. Accordingly, we need to be in that sweet spot where the opponent has 1 or 2 cards that they really want to keep in hand for their next turn. If they're in that zone, we'll draw cards. And this creates a kind of snowball effect. We'll keep saying, you have few cards, can I draw some cards? And constantly deal them 3 or more damage on our turn. This deck was built with that goal in mind. It struggled for a long time, it couldn't find its optimal game plan. I tried to use more cards directly from the Doctor Who villain Precon, but it didn't work out. And in the end I arrived at this golden mean, a build that allows you to systematically deal damage to your opponents or make them lose life, and constantly, as long as Davros is on the board, keep asking them that very question. If an opponent suddenly gets some creatures, we'll ask them to sacrifice those creatures. We don't necessarily have to kill. We want every opponent to immediately understand that we are the main threat here. So this is a deck from the second bracket. Accordingly, there are no game changers here, no top tier cards. As you can see, there is one card here with a red highlight. Later, this red highlight will disappear if you check the deck list linked in the description, because this Kefka is from an unreleased set. Kefka held this spot for a long time, but I wanted to get rid of it, because in a discard deck and in a sacrifice deck, it's kind of, well, boring. For those who don't know, it's a 4 or 5 threat for 5 mana that says whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent, we can take it from their graveyard and put it onto our battlefield. Of course, it's one of the best, scariest, and most unpleasant creatures in the discard zone. But I don't want to be that ruthless with people in the second bracket, because at the very least it's boring. So let's find something of our own. Yes, with some discard elements, but something unique. And here's what I found. I found a system in which our main goal is to ramp up to a fairly large amount of mana over the course of the game. This is important because at the right moment, if the situation calls for it, we want to have enough resources available so that we can cast an X spell, such as a powerful fireball for direct damage or a draining spell to sap our opponent's life total. Alternatively, we might want to play our impactful spells that cost 4 or more mana, which can often turn the tide of the game in our favor. There are quite a few big spells here that cost 4 or more, and there are even spells that cost 8. Now we'll get acquainted with all of them, and you'll understand which direction the deck is heading. Let's start by looking at the mana curve. We have a certain number of 1-drops. The largest number of cards are in the 2-drop, 3-drop, and 4-drop slots, and there are a couple of 8-drops as well. The deck is predominantly black, with a small splash of red and just a tiny bit of blue. In the deck, we use a certain number of lands and MDFCs, totaling 38. And here in particular, we use Cabal Coffers and Urborg, and we can search for them quite efficiently. Cabal Coffers. For 2 mana, tap it to get an amount of black mana equal to the number of swamps you control. And accordingly, to make this work, if you happen to not know this simple combo, we also have Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth in the deck. It says that every land is a swamp in addition to its other types. This works on opponents' lands as well, but the main thing for us is that it works on our own lands. How can we find these lands efficiently? We have several tutors for that. A few of the land tutors are: for 3 mana, tap and sacrifice this land, search your library for any land, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. For example, if we have Cabal Coffers in hand and we need to find Urborg, we can do this at instant speed during an opponent's end step. No problem. Also, as a tutor, we have Talaria West. We can transmute it. Pay 1 and 2 blue. Discard this card. Search your library for a card with mana value 0. Reveal it and put it into your hand. Lands are cards with mana value 0. Accordingly, we can find any land by discarding Talaria West for 3 mana. So again, it's 3 mana and losing a land, but we get exactly what we need. There is another permanent in our deck that allows us to efficiently search for either Cabal Coffers or Urborg. That is Expedition Map. For 2 mana and tapping, sacrifice this artifact. Search your library for a land card, any land, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. If it so happens that you've already found both Urborg and Cabal Coffers, and you have everything you need, then you have several options to choose from. Bojuka Bog, to exile an opponent's graveyard. Demolition Field, to destroy an important land, possibly an opponent's Cabal Coffers or a Minos Cemetery. We also have survival kits, just in case. And we even have Rix Madi Dungeon Palace. This is a land that makes each player discard a card. So we can bring the opponent, including through our land slots, to a state where they have few cards in hand. Here we play a certain number of fetch lands and surveil lands on the first turn for color fixing. I don't use a large number of fetch lands. I don't like having too many of them, even in 3-color decks. I think a couple is enough for me, and as practice shows, just 3-color fetches are sufficient and everything will be fine. For those who don't know, for example, Polluted Delta is a fetch land. Pay 1 life, sacrifice this land, search your library for an island or swamp, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. With Polluted Delta we can fetch either a surveil land. Absolutely fantastic. I really respect this whole cycle that lets you look at the top card and either keep it on top, put it into the graveyard, or shock for speed. But overall, since this is the second bracket, we don't really need super speed here, although there is still some element of speed present. We can snowball our opponents and they might concede. Or we might start taking out 1 or 2 opponents around turn 8. But since we're hitting everyone at once, it's possible we'll be taking out several opponents at the same time. So let's take a look at what's going on here and how we want to achieve our desired results. Let's start with the creatures. We have a certain number of creatures that support this strategy for us. Aquazol, Deepest Betrayal. I really like the fascinating and intriguing theme of gods and magic from the set called Ixalan, and I actually have these powerful gods in my personal collection. In some of my other decks, you might have noticed that, for example, in Shelob, I also use one of the gods from this particular cycle. And here it's absolutely fitting as well. Aquazol has flying, lifelink, and is a 4/4. It's important for us that our attacking creatures have power greater than 2. We need 3 or more to trigger Davros. Here, 4 is a perfect fit. When it attacks, each opponent discards a card, and for each one who can't, we draw a card. So, if we've brought an opponent to the point where they have no cards left, we just draw cards up to 3. When an opponent discards a land, we create a 1/1 flying bat. When it dies, it transforms into a land. In general, we can even transform it back. That has happened in the deck. Let's move on. Let's go through the creatures. Archon of Cruelty is one of those finishers meant to push especially card-rich opponents down to where the others are. Flying 6/6. When this creature enters the battlefield or attacks, target opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker of their choice, discards a card, and loses 3 life. So here, we're both clearing the board state and making sure that this particular opponent loses 3 life. We make them discard, we also draw a card, and we gain 3 life. Archon of Cruelty is a very serious creature here. Next is the Avton Soldier. This is a clone that will let us get another ETB effect because it has Myriad. And it ignores the legendary rule. Moreover, we can clone any creature. We have quite a few legendary creatures with ETB effects, and Afton Soldier can clone them, or it can clone Davros himself. Well, why not? That way we'll get 2 triggers at the end. Bogart Trawler is a good MDFC creature since we make the opponent discard, and we need to do something about graveyard strategies. We need to exile their graveyard. Bojuka Bog is good, but Bogart Trawler and Bojuka Bog together are even better. Caustic Bronco is a really cool creature that can come out in the early game. And it has an option. When it attacks, reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand. Then lose life equal to that card's mana value. Our mana values are quite high, so we can end up losing a lot of life. I've lost 8 life and still won that game because it was worth it. But of course, the best thing here is the saddle trigger. When this creature is saddled and attacks, we reveal the top card, and our opponents lose life equal to its mana value. We can play Caustic Bronco on turn 2 or 3, then play Davros later, and Davros himself can saddle the Caustic Bronco. This way we don't lose any life, our opponents lose life, we draw a card, and we also get the triggers. Very efficient. Dalek Drone is a removal from the precon, flying. It also has Exterminate. When this creature enters the battlefield, destroy target creature and opponent controls. That player loses 3 life. We need to control the number of creatures on the board so that our creatures can get through to the face. Accordingly, the best target is usually someone's commander, because that most often disrupts their development strategy. Or it could be some important creature that would let us get through to the face, or even an unimportant creature. There might be a couple of tokens standing there. You kill one token, exterminate it, and then get through to the face. Dalek Drone is a nice creature. Next, Dalek Squadron is one of the best creatures in our deck because it's an artifact creature with Myriad. When this creature attacks for each other opponent, create a tapped and attacking token copy that's attacking that player. So if we have Dalek Squadron and we play Davros, Dalek Squadron goes on the attack, most likely gets through to each opponent's face, and we get 3 triggers, 3 questions for our opponents. We'll draw a card, or they'll have to discard. Enduring Courage. A very cool, unique, and truly awesome creature. One that lets us activate or trigger our attack abilities. Some creatures, as you'll see later, have attack triggers. For example, Aquazokal has an attack trigger that makes everyone discard. Secondly, Enduring Courage comes back from the graveyard when it dies, and it has 3 power itself. If Davros comes out, he gives it haste and things immediately get better. And honestly, before I added this haste package, a package that lets my creatures act faster, get their triggers sooner, and deal combat damage, it was pretty sad. And probably the biggest overhaul I made was adding Enduring Courage and a few other enchantments and artifacts that provide that very acceleration. And here, the acceleration is even +2. So it's just awesome. Grey Merchant of Asphodel. We're not abusing this creature here. Grey Merchant of Asphodel is played here even just as a 5-drop when only Davros is on the board, because when it enters, it checks devotion to black and drains life. If Davros is on the board and Grey Merchant of Asphodel is on the board, the total devotion to black is at least 3. Accordingly, we've drained 3 life from the opponent, gained 9 life ourselves, and at the end of the turn we'll get a trigger. If we happen to have more black creatures and the deck is mostly black, we can of course drain a much larger amount of life from our opponents. And if we can kill him and reanimate him, there's a bit of recursion here, but it's a very good reanimation target, then Gary's effectiveness will be even greater. Cunning Electric Specimen. It's mostly a land, but sometimes you want to protect your commander or some important creature on the battlefield. And it can be played as a creature with flash that, when it enters, changes the target of an instant or sorcery to itself. Swords, Path to Exile, other targeted removal, he takes the hit, poor guy, for himself. Kefka orders Sword, a creature I could never have dreamed of. But in the Final Fantasy set, the guys from Magic, the Gathering, are going to release him. Ooh, comrades, yes, thank you! When Kefka enters the battlefield or attacks, each player discards a card. Then I draw a card for each card type that was discarded this way. So for example, we can discard an artifact creature. That's 2 types. Opponents might discard a land and an instant, and then we get to draw 4 cards. Awesome, 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 wonderful. For 8, he does some truly terrifying things. He says that each opponent's sacrifice is a permanent of their choice, after which he transforms. He transforms into a monster, and honestly, I'm afraid I might never transform him, because I could just accidentally draw out my entire library that way. When an opponent loses life during my turn, I draw that many cards, and it's not a may. I just have to draw. I can't refuse this trigger, so most likely I'll never flip him over. I'm completely satisfied with him as he is because he's an excellent card draw for 5 mana and also has 4 power. So if he gets through to the face, he'll also trigger Davros afterwards. Give him haste? I can already feel a lot of cards in my hand right away. It feels great immediately. Kroxa, Titan of Death's Hunger. That's a Davros trigger. If opponents have no cards or they discard lands, that's a Davros trigger. Afterwards, we can easily play it from escape, make it attack with haste. A 6/6 fits perfectly into any discard deck. Titans are awesome. What else can I say? Lull Subordinate is a threat, a zombie, 3/1, and it has a main trigger, Lieutenant. At the beginning of your combat, if you control your commander, each opponent loses 3 life. So if we have Lull Subordinate on the board, and we play Davros, we immediately get the trigger. It works perfectly. A huge creature was recently added to this list, and you know, it won me 2 games. Margin of Knight's Reach. When it enters the battlefield, put a divinity counter on it if you cast it from your hand. It has indestructible as long as it has a divinity counter, and we can remove that counter at instant speed to make each opponent discard their hand. This is really good if someone has a lot of card draw. So, for example, if someone has yes, I understand that in the second bracket this card might not be there, but still. Opponents can be different, and we are mentally prepared for anything. So if anything, this is a button that says, you're out of cards, guys. And then we get benefits from some of our creatures that see there are no cards in hand and are happy about it. Or sometimes the opponent just gets really upset, and that's a good reason for us to win unexpectedly. Nicole Bolas, the Ravager. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card, and on the flip side, it's a Planeswalker with excellent abilities. Draw 2 cards for +2, deal 10 damage to target creature or Planeswalker for -3, reanimate target creature, like Grey Merchant or any other creature they discarded, onto the battlefield under your control for -4, and as for -12, we've never gotten there because people always try to kill him, and he draws a lot of attention to himself. Nicol Bolas is very powerful, and that 4-mana creature that also hits face and triggers is strong too. Rankle, Master of Pranks. An excellent creature for this deck. And besides the fact that we can sacrifice our Dalek drones and other creatures that come in with Myriad to Rankle's trigger, where each player sacrifices a creature, we can also just sacrifice the Daleks that Davros creates. So we always have something we can sacrifice. Secondly, he makes everyone discard, and thirdly, he gives a card. He's especially perfect when opponents have no cards in hand, and then we give them one. By giving them that one card, the opponent will be left wondering whether they actually want to keep it. If they don't want it, they'll discard it, but if they do, then we get to draw another card. Edge-shouldered. Sheoldred is a large creature with devotion to black, and she can also serve as a mass reanimator. And then, on her second chapter, if we get to it, each opponent discards 3 cards. This is a very effective creature. Most of the time she draws removal onto herself, which is fine as long as it's not targeting Davros. Plus she has a good effect against non-token creatures or planeswalkers. Slicer is an artifact creature that always hits for 3 and makes opponents at the table think about what to do with Slicer. This is a good start. We'll chip away at our opponent's life totals, and at some point they'll just find themselves in a situation where, unfortunately, they have too little life left to survive this game. Slicer is good. Tectonic Giant is another creature that, when it attacks or becomes the target of a spell controlled by an opponent, deals 3 damage to each opponent. And if we've already accomplished the 3 damage task and we're running low on cards, it's also an impulse draw. Tiny Bones is new from Foundations. It says that when an opponent discards a card, exile it with a stash counter, and during my turn I can play cards I don't own with a stash counter and use any mana to cast them. Plus, it has an ability for 4 mana, 3 and a black, tap it. Each opponent discards a card. You can activate this only as a sorcery. Very good. A very good little tiny bones. There used to be the previous one here, and actually the whole idea for this deck came about because a friend asked me to optimize his tiny bones deck, and we ended up making a deck that finally started winning with the other original tiny bones who has since left this deck. But this one, just by being on the board in front of everyone, manages to convince my opponents that they need to give me cards, even if they're holding on to cards that they could part with or maybe don't really plan to use. Simply having it out there makes people reconsider what they're willing to give up, even if those cards aren't especially important to them. But Tiny Bones, the very fact of exiling someone else's card, it has a psychological effect on the opponent. Weeping Angel is an artifact creature from the Doctor Who precon. It's a very interesting answer. It has Flash, First Strike, and Vigilance. When an opponent casts a creature spell, this creature stops being a creature and becomes just an artifact. When this creature, or rather if this creature would deal combat damage to another creature, prevent that damage and shuffle that creature into its owner's library. It's an excellent removal for opponent's creatures that attack you, not destroying, not exiling, but shuffling them into the library. It works great against commanders. As they say, don't attack me, I have a few tricks up my sleeve too. The flavor is from Doctor Who with a villainous twist from the precon. Of course, Blasphemous Act, 13 damage to each creature, and of course, Blasphemous Edict, sacrifice 13 creatures. We don't want our opponents to have any creatures. We need some way to deal with a big board. Of course, we'll be playing Blasphemous Edict not in the middle of the game, but rather early on, when it's in our opening hand, and we know that at some point we'll play it. We won't play our creatures right away. Instead, we'll wait for the right moment to cast Blasphemous Edict, and only then will we play our own creatures. Because some opponents can have a very strong start, especially in terms of the number of creatures on the board. Bolt Wave is a fantastic spell. It's a common from Foundations that for a single red mana gives me a Davros trigger. Oh, excellent! These are exactly the kinds of spells I wanted, not for 4 mana. Of course, you can use one for 4 mana, but for just 1, I couldn't not include it. And Delete is usually played with X equals 3 to deal 3 damage to each non-artifact creature and each player to get a trigger. It's kind of it's a finisher. Doomsday Confluence. Most often it's used in the mode where each opponent discards or each player sacrifices a non-artifact creature. Either or. I almost never created Daleks. That's also a card from the precon with X. If you manage to play it with a big X, then basically we can make all opponents completely discard. Exsanguinate can be played with X equals 3, 3 and 2 black. Each opponent loses 3 life, and we gain life. It can also be a finisher, so it's a flexible spell depending on the situation at hand. Why am I willing to play such spells for 3? Because Davros costs 4 mana, and on the next turn I'll have 5. Well, logically speaking. And so we can use it right away, without waiting for some perfect moment and without thinking of it as our finisher. Use it here and now. This is a card that will give you 9 life. That's also very, very nice. Oh, and besides Gary, we have a couple more ways to gain life. Exterminate. More than one player has been killed by Exterminate, especially with Replication. Tap an untapped Dalek you control and copy the spell. It says, destroy target creature. Its controller loses 3 life. A wonderful spell for 3 mana that, if you have 2 Daleks, can trigger Davros for each opponent, and you also get to destroy a creature for each of them. Let's play a game. Wonderful. I couldn't resist it. As soon as I saw it, I decided I needed a deck where I would play spells called Let's Play a Game. Sometimes we play with Delirium, sometimes without, but most often without. In the modes, either each opponent discards 2 cards, or each opponent loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. So either way, it's good. Oh, and creatures under an opponent's control get -1. That's a mode that's almost never used. Ranklesprang can be played in all modes. A very powerful spell that will both trigger Davros for us and make opponents discard, and if necessary make them sacrifice 2 creatures of their choice. Again, it's board control. Yes, here we use both destroy and edict effects in combination. Siphon Mind, each player discards a card, and you basically draw 3 for each card discarded this way. That's almost what Kefka does, but Kefka does it better and consistently. But we still want to play Siphon Mind because we need some kind of card draw that's tied to making opponents discard. Obzedat's Will of the Obzedat is a fantastic spell. If we control our commander, first of all, any number of target opponents each sacrifice the creature with the greatest power and lose 3 life. That is, they always lose 3 life. And secondly, it's reanimation from the graveyard to the battlefield. Yes, it can reanimate Gary as well. Possibly Kefnet, or Nicol Bolas, or Rankle, or Shieldred. We have plenty of targets to reanimate if suddenly is even Kroxa. It'll be sacrificed afterwards, but in any case, that's another Kroxa trigger. Abzan Charm is a wonderful spell. Dark Ritual. We've already moved on to instants. Fell to Profane. Most often it's a land, but just in case, let's have it as a destroy for a creature or planeswalker as well. Ragdesh Charm. We play with discard, so we need to be able to do something about the opponent's graveyard. The modes. Destroying a target artifact is useful, and there's also an answer to infinite creatures. Yes, each creature deals 1 damage to its controller or to a wide board. That's what we handle the worst. So if we didn't manage to discard the opponent in time, or if the opponent built up a big board, well, at least we can kill them this way. Shieldred's Edict. The modes let you choose non-token, token creatures, or planeswalker at instant speed. Perfect. Soul Shatter is another instant speed edict effect. And with effects like these, I want to disrupt my opponent's tempo. Our own tempo is to play Davros on turn 3 or 4 and get his trigger. Enemy tempos, especially commander-dependent decks, will try to get their commander onto the board as early as possible. We too generally can play with our commander or without. This isn't exactly a commander-focused deck, but Soul Shatter and Shieldred's Edict let you cut down the juiciest targets from your opponents at instant speed during the end step. That's the kind of thing we love. Suspended Sentence. In Duskmourn, this wonderful instant spell appeared, which says, destroy any creature, that player loses 3 life and with 3 time counters. Then it will be cast again. This is an option to trigger Davros and have this effect come back. It'll go off at least a couple of times per game. A wonderful spell. Whistering Torment. We need to deal with enchantments, and sometimes with creatures. Why not do it at instant speed? A new spell from Duskmourn. Destroy any creature or enchantment, lose 2 life. Let's move on to artifacts. Agatha's Soul Cauldron. Again, we want to do something about enemy graveyards and not let them reanimate their good creatures. And this is a way to clear the opponent's graveyard, as well as to gain activated abilities, for example, from Tiny Bones himself. We don't have synergy with +1/+1 counters. It's here mainly just to keep an eye on what people are discarding into their graves. Arcane Signet Cursed Mirror. A wonderful way to get some ETB effect from our perhaps non-legendary Dalek drone, or to copy something good on the board that can also go on the attack. Expedition Map, the familiar Felwar Stone, and Geth's Grimoire, an artifact that says whenever someone discards, I can draw a card. Since we're likely making everyone discard at once, we can get 3 cards, or maybe 2 if someone decides to let me draw. So in any case, Geth's Grimoire is on the battlefield, Davros triggers, and we get a handful of cards. Most likely they'll just let us draw. It's also the kind of artifact that says, well, I'm going to draw a card no matter what, do whatever you want. It's a choice without a choice, my friend. And our opponents understand that. Lightning Greaves is protection and haste. It's simple. Mind Stone and Relic of Sauron. Relic of Sauron is a wonderful mana rock in Greaves' colors. It will be present in all my decks. It comes from the Lord of the Rings precon, gives 2 mana in any combination, and in a pinch also lets you go up a card if you tap it for 3 mana, draw 2 cards and then discard 1. Slow Ring, Sword of Feast and Famine. A good sword that lets us play something in the first main phase, then attack, untap all our lands, and if we get through to someone, that player discards a card. Again, this is a sword with a discard sub-theme. But since we want to play big spells, this untapping lands effect is very nice for us. Talismans of Creativity, Talismans of Dominance, Indulgence, and so on. We're playing with basics, and overall there aren't that many ramp options in Grixis, so let's take advantage of this option as well. Next, our enchantments. Enchantments are probably the strongest thing we can offer our opponent. And if there's anything to break in my deck, it's the enchantments. And that's Court of Ambition. It's a very powerful court that makes me the Monarch. We can generally hold on to the Monarch pretty well because we have flying creatures and creatures with reach. And creatures with menace. So we can take the Monarch back. But what it does during the upkeep, for us, that's basically always a trigger. It says during upkeep, each opponent loses 3 life unless they discard a card. If I'm the Monarch, then they have to lose 6 life unless they discard 2 cards. If the opponent has only 1 card and I'm the Monarch, they can't discard 2, so they lose 6 life. That puts a lot of pressure on their HP, a huge amount, and it's constant. And it doesn't matter whether I'm the Monarch or not. 3 life is enough for me, believe me. Or you'll have to discard a card. That means if I attack you, you'll have to give me a card. Descent into Avernus is something that speeds up the game. But since I'll be the first to use those treasures, and besides, the opponents won't have any cards left to play anyway. Why do they need cards? Why do they need money if they don't have any cards? That's it. So, in my opinion, Descent into Avernus is a wonderful enchantment which by its second tick will already be effectively giving us a Davros trigger. And with it, I can also keep pumping Davros constantly. Yes, it will be hitting me too, but my deck has life gain while my opponents might not. So, Descent into Avernus has definitely earned its place here. At the beginning of my upkeep, put 2 descent counters on this enchantment, then each player creates X treasure tokens, and this enchantment deals X damage to each player, where X is the number of descent counters on this enchantment. So first it's 2, then 4, then 6, then 8. And most likely you should win here. Fervor is an enchantment that for 2 and a red gives our creatures haste. An old enchantment in a beautiful version. Gonti's Machinations. This is an interesting enchantment. As you can see, there is an energy counter here. When you lose life for the first time each turn, you get an energy. Pay 2 energy, sacrifice this enchantment, each opponent loses 3 life, and you gain life equal to the amount lost. So you gain 9. Considering that I play with Painlands and Talismans that can hurt me, I can intentionally deal damage to myself on my own turn. If, for example, the opponent doesn't show any aggression in the early turns by the time our Davros comes out, Gonti's Machinations will already be charged. That is, I would have 2 energy counters. As soon as Davros enters the battlefield, I immediately sacrifice Gonti's Machinations and instantly get Davros' trigger, even if I don't go into combat that turn. This is yet another way for just 1 mana spent in previous turns, with the right setup by dealing damage to myself. Well, for example, cracking a fetch land, that's already enough. Gonti's Machinations will give us a Davros trigger immediately when Davros enters the battlefield. Meat Hook Massacre 2. Yes? Yes. 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 When it enters, each player sacrifices a creature. That's the first thing. Also, whenever a creature under an opponent's control dies, they can pay 3 life. If they don't, then I get it back. So it's either reanimating enemy creatures, which I'll keep asking them to sacrifice or destroy, or they pay 3 life, which suits me just fine. And this reanimation also works for my own creatures, plus it adds devotion to black for Gary's entrance. Wonderful. It fits here in every way. Painful Quandary is an enchantment that basically ends the game. If I have the court out and I have Painful Quandary out, then most likely I can win very quickly. And when this enchantment comes into play, opponents need to destroy it as quickly as possible, otherwise it will be very tough for them. Really, extremely tough, because I'll be making them lose 5 life each time. I'll completely discard their hands. When an opponent casts a spell, that player loses 5 life unless they discard a card. Fantastic. It's practically a finisher. Next is Pain Magnification, a fun enchantment I noticed one of the players I played with using, and I was really surprised I hadn't seen it before. It says, whenever an opponent is dealt 3 or more damage from a single source, that player discards a card. My Davros, my Daleks, they all deal 3 damage. So, during combat, we can make an opponent discard several cards. In other words, it's that very targeted control over a single opponent who has a large hand. And most often, it ends up getting hit by removal. Then I show them Painful Quandary and say, this is going to hurt a lot. Rising of the Day is a great enchantment that gives legendaries an extra +1, and all creatures get haste. The enchantment Waste Not. I mean, where could we possibly go without Waste Not? All its modes are good. We get zombies, which we can later sacrifice to our own discard effects. We get mana if an opponent discards a land, and we draw cards if an opponent discards a non-land. So it's an engine for a discard deck. It pairs perfectly with another enchantment, Words of Waste. For just 1 mana, we get a replacement effect that will turn our next card draw, literally any draw at all, into an opponent discarding a card instead. In combination with Waste Not, if we're in our main phase, or really, it doesn't matter what phase we're in, even during the end step, say, in response to the Monarch trigger, we pay 1 mana and can EA replace that effect with a discard. And if an opponent discards a land to Waste Not, we get more mana, and if another opponent discards, we get another trigger to draw a card, and we can use that mana again for Words of Waste and once more force everyone to discard, making it so that our opponents end up with no cards in hand at all. So basically what we need is a combination. Well, we need 2 enchantments on the board and a combination of whatever they're discarding. If they don't coordinate with each other or realize that they've already gone too far, and I have several draw triggers that I can convert into discard effects for a bunch of mana, then they'll just end up with no cards in hand. It works well. And next we have our set of lands. Well, here we've gotten acquainted with the deck. Now let's take a look at some opening hands. What they might look like, which hands I would keep, and which I wouldn't. Let's head down. We understand that our main color is black and the secondary is red. We see that we have Catacomb, Demolition Field, Arcane Signet, Wheel of Zan, that is cards that cost 4 mana and 6 mana, and Cursed Mirror. That's not bad. If we get another land, we'll have Ramp on turn 2 and Ramp on turn 3. Next, we can play, say, Davros and decide whether it will be Abzan Will or Rancor. Maybe even both. Let's see. Overall, not the worst hand. We take the Catacomb card, tapped on the first turn, Blasphemous Edict. Blasphemous Act isn't the best, but on turn 2, we have the Signet. A land would be nice right now. Didn't get it. But these are still heavy casts. Shouldn't have kept it. Now, this hand I like a lot more. Here we have both Arcane Signet and Felwar Stone, a 3rd drop, plus Kefnet as a 5th drop, and also Relic of Sauron. Yes, of course, this is ideal for boiling, and we'll start with Shivan Reef. By the way, let me do this for you so you can see what we have in hand. We'll start with Shivan Reef. Great. Swamp Arcane Signet for Arcane Signet. Next, we can go this route. Play the stone, crack the bauble, we'll skip the land drop here, but overall things are looking pretty good for us. We'll have 5 mana on the next turn, so we can play Relic of Sauron and Cursed Mirror, ramping up to a pretty big amount of mana, which we'll use to cast Rising of the Day, and then later play Kefka, so we'll be putting pressure on the opponent in this way. Let's find what we need to get with the bauble. With the money, we'll most likely find Island. No, not Island, that's incorrect. We need a mountain, we need a mountain. We need a mountain. Next turn, Agate Soul Cauldron. Well, at this point, the number of lands doesn't really bother me anymore. What concerns me more here are Relic of Sauron, then Cursed Mirror, and then a land. And now we're on turn 5. And here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 mana. We've reached 9 mana. With this, most likely we'll be casting Rising the Day, which will be further adjusted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll play Kefka. When Kefka enters, we'll discard a card. We'll discard Dalek from the squadron. That's 2 types. All players discard simultaneously. Accordingly, we'll draw at least 2 cards. If someone discards a land, someone else discards a sorcery, then we'll draw 2 more cards. So we can assume that we're about to draw 4 cards. And yes, even though we missed a land drop, we still... What was our main goal? We needed to play Kefka in order to draw cards. And now we're in a situation where we have an Auton soldier in hand, which can be a copy of Kefka and can keep coming into play. We'll have a lot of cards and everything will come out with acceleration. Auton soldier will get even more. We'll get the myriad trigger. We'll have a ton of cards. Our card selection will be fantastic, and our opponents will be discarding. They'll be discarding 1, 2, 3, 4 cards. They'll be discarding that many on their next turn. How many cards will they have left, considering that Kefka made them discard on entry and on attack with haste? And we've made them discard 6 cards over 2 turns. Most likely there's nothing left there. The main thing is that our rocks don't get destroyed. But at the early stage of the game, it's unlikely you'll see a Vandal Blast. The next hand I want to look at, there are quite a few lands, and some of them even produce colored mana, which is nice. You can keep Exotic Orchard if there's a black opponent, then with Dark Ritual we'll be in a good spot. In that case, things will actually be pretty good. We need to pick up at least one more color over the course of drawing 4 cards, so that after we play Rising the Day, we can cast Davros. If we don't find the color, that's unfortunate. But in the worst case, if things go really badly, we have the combination of Dark Ritual and Blasphemous Edict. Let's take a look. First card draw, it's a swamp. Okay, we're definitely sticking to our game plan. We can do it this way, we can calmly play. We don't have to rush to cast Rising the Day right now, because next turn we still won't be able to play Davros, even if we do cast Rising the Day. Here we can show a measured approach. Find a Surveil card, set up our top deck with Soul Ring on top. Perfect. We'll leave Soul Ring on top of the deck. Now, this is truly the perfect moment, the exact point in time, when we can actually try to carefully assemble a combination, a specific set of cards and actions that will ultimately let us play Rising the Day. If we really want to, we could just cast Dark Ritual here and simply do nothing else at all. Not cast Dark Ritual. But if by turn 3 they suddenly have 13 creatures, we can announce Blasphemous Edict on them. But having Soul Ring on top of the deck is wonderful. Most likely our opponent will be playing blue, so even now we can play Davros. We have 3 colors, we can tap Soul Ring, but it's unlikely we'll use the colorless mana this turn, so it'll go to waste, and we'll get Davros' first attack, and most likely the opponent will have to discard. After that, we're really getting flooded with lands. In that case, since we're getting so many lands, let's start discarding with Rixmadi Dungeon Palace. With this combination, we can announce to our opponents that they'll have fewer cards. We'll also have to discard a card. Let's die either removal, but we can keep the removal since we have a big Edict in hand. So we can do without removal for now and stick with Bojuka Bog if needed. And use Davros again. Yes, by this point we should already have the first Dalek, because we probably managed to get through somewhere. And now we'll likely get through to 2 players, most likely targeting those with fewer cards, to put some pressure on them using Rixmadi and Davros. And maybe, when we create a Dalek token at the end step, we might even draw another card, one more out of spite. Oh, Rankle. Wonderful. With Rankle, we can play by making everyone discard and sacrifice a creature. In that case, if our opponents have about 2 or 3 cards left by turn 6, we're already effectively starting to draw cards. Let's take a look at another hand. 2 lands, Exsanguinate, Arcane Signet, Auton Soldier. Well, here are 2 spells I don't really want to see in my opening hand. A response like Viper Angel is good, and we'll even have black mana from here. Well, it's risky. Yes, there's something that can trigger Davros, but even then we'll only be able to put it into suspend on turn 3, which isn't something I really want to do. Well, just for fun, let's see what the deck gives us. Tiny Bones isn't bad. An island, Surveil card, not bad, but let's start by playing some mana. Listen, we drew well on lands, so we can stick to the plan.
Either during this turn we play Tiny Bones and then we put this spell into suspend, making sure to add 3 time counters to it, so that on the next turn we will be able to play Davros, and at that time we can do so with Surveil. Here's another land. Let's even send the land over there in that particular way. Or we could do something else. Or we might not play Davros. We could start playing Tiny Bones, making our opponents discard cards. That's also an option. And we'll play Davros when the suspend on sentence is about to resolve. We can also go with that strategy. Let's look at the next hand. Land 1, Land 2, Land 3, thanks to Bogart. Land 4, a Bagel, and the Relic of Sauron. This is an excellent hand. Plus Blasphemous Edict, Blasphemous Act. This is an excellent hand. Yes, we have 2 tapped lands, but that's not a big deal. Or rather, one is definitely tapped, and the other might be tapped. Let's get started. Super. Super. We start with the Bagel. Oof, freeze bubble. Next, we can either play Kroxa or blow up the Bagel. Of course, blow up the Bagel. We're blowing up the Bagel. We need... Let's take a red mountain. Let's take a red one. Next turn, we play in Shock and Bogart Roller, Relic of Sauron on our battlefield. And here, in combination with everything in the world, we release Crocs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mana. With 6 mana, we can afford... Obviously, Bajuka Bog will come in as a tapped land. With 6 mana, we can afford Bolt Wave plus Davros. So it would look something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Davros, Bolt Wave, Bajuka Bog as a tapped land, and bam! We are in an optimal mana state, and if needed, we have removal for the biggest among the opponent's creatures or planeswalkers. What else do we have? We have Rising of the Day, and for important negotiations we have Blasphemous Act. Most likely with this combination we won't get a card right away, and we'll see the card on the next turn. But if you're worried, we have card selection in the form of this thing. Since we have the Talisman, I see that I want to play the Talisman. I'll draw 2 cards, discard 1. Maybe in this case, by the way, we can discard the Talisman, because right now I want to play a land and cast Lowe's Subordinate. The plan has changed. Let's see. If we're sticking to the plan, then we probably don't need Blasphemous Act. If we're not sticking to the plan and our opponents have a lot of creatures, then I would keep Blasphemous Act and discard Rising of the Day, because the ramp won't matter as much in that case. We found a land, so with 3 mana, I cast Loathsome Subordinate, went into combat, and got a trigger from everyone. Each opponent lost 3 life, and we successfully managed to get Davros' trigger. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We found 1 land. So this is our 5th turn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 mana. And we're accomplishing our goal, already provoking at least 1 opponent to give us a card. Next, we have card selection in the form of activating Sauron's Relic. We have an answer. We have future triggers, and I feel like this hand turned out really well. Alright, let's see what we've got here. We have Verge, Blood Crypt, Demolition Field, and Tolaria West as our land search options, but we'll only have access to a single blue mana source. So, either we play Demolition Field, blow it up, and then really want to use Tolaria West as a tutor, or we just play Tolaria West as a land on the first turn, and that's it. A hand without mana rocks for ramp, which isn't great, but with a decent get, Grimoire, and Loathsome Subordinate, meaning we have a consistent trigger and an effect that will benefit us from discard, plus some graveyard control. Let's give it a try. On the first turn we have Aklazotl, so in this case I'll probably play Tolarian West, tapped. On the second turn, something like Ayagatha Soul Cauldron. On the third turn, something like Loathsome Subordinate. And on the 4th turn, we'll play Davros from this and get a trigger. On the 5th turn, it will come in untapped. On the 5th turn, of course, we have Get Grimoire. And here, in this situation, it doesn't matter anymore whether the opponents discard or not. If we've gotten the trigger, we'll see 3 cards in our hand. That's it, we've refreshed our hand and now we have options. We can play around with the opponents a bit using an Edict effect, or we can play Aklazotzel, which will force them to discard faster, which is good. We didn't find any ramp here, but overall we had something to play on the first, second, third and fourth turns. Well, on the first turn, obviously it's just a land, but we also have plays for the 5th and even the 6th turn. So we're following the curve quite efficiently. Given that I have 3 lands in hand, actually 4, we'll definitely be able to curve out up to Archon of Cruelty. And if there are any important negotiations, I'll say, I'll take the Archon of Cruelty and it's going to hurt you. We still have time to look at one more final hand before the end of this broadcast. This time, we don't have the best hand. This will be a mulligan. We've got Greaves, some big removal spells, 2 of them, and an 8-drop plus Cord. Of course, I really want to install the Cord, but not now. Next hand. Not bad, not bad. I want to see a hand where I can attack with Davros on turn 4. So either I play Davros on turn 3 and attack on turn 4, or I play Ramp on turn 3, then Davros on turn 4, and he can attack right away. Overall, I'm satisfied with this kind of hand. Considering we have Surveil, that means on the first turn, we'll look at the top card and decide what to do with it. Alright, let's see. It's Bojuka Bog. I have plenty of lands in my hand overall, so I'll discard it. On the second move, we will have Train Grounds. On turn 3, we'll have Rising of the Day. Kefka is still ahead, everything's great. On the next turn, we can play it like this. Either we play Blasphemous Act now while playing a land, something like that. Blasphemous Act for 3 mana. Then play Pain Magnification to make the discard even harsher. Then on the following turn, we just play Kefka and start drawing cards. So by around turn 5, we should have set up engines that let us draw cards while our opponents have very few cards left, and then we'll start beating them. That's the plan. The victory isn't fast, not fast at all. This isn't an extra fast deck, but thanks to the gradual snowball effect that comes from this card, we can usually seize the advantage by around turn 6. And then we will become Archons and we will have to endure some answers. But if our opponents have no cards in hand, what answers could they possibly have? Friends, that's all I have for today. If you want more, there will be more. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, just a reminder. You can write in the comments about what discard decks you've played, what results you've achieved, because very often the big problem is actually finishing the game with discard. Yes, you've left everyone empty-handed, but then you're like, well, what's next? How do you finish? Well, Davros doesn't have that problem because we're constantly pushing the opponent's life total. We're saying their life total is going to get lower. We keep going into combat with some flying or just big creatures hinting that life is precious and you should take care of it. If someone couldn't handle it, that's not my fault. With that, I'll say goodbye to you. See you next time. Bye.